.NET 9 and beyond with Jeff Fritz.
The Azure DevOps Podcast is a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Each show brings you hard-hitting interviews with industry experts, innovating better methods, and sharing success stories. Listen on to learn how to increase quality, ship quickly, and operate well. And now your host, Jeffrey Palermo.
Welcome to the show. I'm Jeffrey Palermo, your host for helping you and your teams move fast and deliver quality and to run your software with confidence in Azure, all while using everything that the .NET ecosystem has to offer. The podcast is sponsored by ClearMeasure, a full-service software architecture and engineering firm that serves companies using .NET, Azure, and everything Microsoft. We build mission-critical software, rescue failing projects, and empower software delivery teams with a proven approach. I'm excited to announce that my latest book is now fully released. This book is about software leadership. It's called The 5 Pillars, Leadership for Effective Custom Software. This book is really for anyone who's attempting to make a custom software team highly effective. And if you want your team to deliver world-class results, this book could be for you. Teams are also doing book studies and discussions around it, and I'm excited about that. And if you, dear listener, would like a complimentary electronic copy of the book, then just send me an email, and I'd love to get that to you. And for those of you who are in a lead architect or software executive role, you might be interested to join our monthly interactive forums. They're deeply technical sessions that I enjoy facilitating personally, and you can sign up for those on clearmeasure.com. My repeat guest coming back on the show is Jeff Fritz, and he's been on the show several times, but last on episode 278. He's an experienced developer, technical educator, and program manager on the .NET team at Microsoft. He's the producer of the .NET Conf online series of events and regularly live streams builds of websites and fun applications. You can follow Jeff for more .NET, .NET Core, and Visual Studio content on Twitch and Twitter at C#Fritz. We'll include those links in the show notes. But Jeff, welcome back to the show. How are you, sir?
Oh, it's great to be back. This is like the annual, it's like a birthday party. It's like you get together, something cool is released. We've got great new stuff happening. And I get to visit with you, Jeff, and talk about some of the great stuff that's happening.
That's right.
I'm really happy with where we are here in December 2024.
Nice. And I think you and so many teammates, you're about to take some much needed vacation because you guys have been so busy. I want to ask you about that with .NET Conf just happening and some regional conferences like Tech Bash and then Ignite hot on the heels, but just kind of pause real quickly for those who are really just hearing the name Jeff Fritz and haven't checked out, all the different things that are going on, and just like a quick overview of all the stuff that you do and that's out there.
Oh my gosh. So you mentioned up top in the bio that I help produce. I'm one of the leads that runs the .NET Conf series of events. So we had .NET Conf, the big virtual event here at the beginning of November. I plan and manage the group that delivers that. And we started planning for that event back in April, beginning of April. So this is not something that just in 2-3 weeks we say, hey, let's get a bunch of folks together and talk about .NET. No,
right.
It was 100 and some sessions, including recorded sessions that we made available over what is now a 5-day event, 3 days live, a day of an education day that's focused on content for folks that are new in their career, and then a 5th day that is just pre-recorded premieres, other content that didn't quite make the cut for the launch, but we also felt was very valuable and we wanted to make available as a series of YouTube premieres. So we have that I do. I help plan, write, and deliver a bunch of training material. If you stumble into the Azure, there's an Azure beginner series on YouTube. You're going to recognize the face that teaches that. I wrote that workshop. I deliver all kinds of stuff online, teaching about .NET Aspire, about Blazor, about web development with .NET, using all of ASP.NET Core. And then I deliver the sessions about that content in person to user groups, to conferences, and to customers that I get a chance to visit with all over the world. So It's and of course my passion is live streaming and talking to folks live one-on-one using the power of Twitch and YouTube and the live streaming platforms to get some time to really talk to folks and answer those nitty-gritty questions that at the end of a presentation at a conference they want to come up and talk to you on the side. Hey, I did want to raise my hand, but I wanted to ask you about, and to be able to have that conversation with them in a more intimate online forum like that. Really great stuff that I enjoy.
Nice. Well, like we mentioned, .NET 9 is out, series of conferences, lots of announcements. There's too much that we could possibly touch on now, but you're just kind of catching your breath from all that stuff. And the listeners are going on YouTube and it's like, oh shoot, how many hours and days would I have to watch YouTube to catch up on literally everything? Which the DOT NET YouTube channel has all of the .NET Conf and of course MS Ignite. But what things stand out in your mind for .NET developers? Just that, hey, if people are trying to catch up now, what things should they absolutely not miss, in your opinion?
I would start with .NET Aspire. .NET Aspire is going to give folks the foundation for a good application. As somebody, gosh, Jeff, we've been building applications for years and years. Yeah. And every time that you go through and you start building an application, there's a handful of things that you get probably 80, 120 hours into working on the application. You go, darn it, you know what I forgot to put in there? It was this. Or, gosh, I've got to go back and retrofit and put that in there. And some of these things with .NET Aspire are just in the box by default. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to go write additional code. And it makes your application better.
Yeah.
I don't have to think about going back and adding logging to all of my database statements. It does it by default with the way that we hook up the integrations to the various database providers. I don't have to go back through there and wire up all the metrics collections so that I can see how the interactions happen, the timing and the performance of the interactions with various components inside of my application. It's already logged and managed and reported on a really cool dashboard that's better than anything that I could have built by hand. It's already done for you. And as you add more metrics, it'll just log and report them for you on that dashboard. Fantastic. You've already got all the plumbing for it. The resiliency. How many of us have actually gone and written retry logic? Maybe you've written retry logic for interacting with web APIs, but have you written retry logic for working with the database? For working with log storage? Like, that's the kind of thing that you don't need it until you realize, oh, crumbs, I have so much hit in the database that I should have retry logic in there. Now I've got to go write it, but I'm already hundreds of hours, thousands of hours, team hours into building my application. Where all do I go and add that? It's there by default, and you can tweak and tune it with the configuration options that are delivered by default with .NET Aspire. Yeah. Health checks are already embedded in it. Service discovery is embedded in it. These are the things that we always look back at, and you're a couple months into development and go, oh, I got to go add that. And you end up not doing it, or it ends up being some other person's responsibility. That we're going to hire a consultant to come in and just retrofit and add that in. And no, you end up never doing it. But it's there by default, and you can add it to existing applications so easily. Don't miss out on it. .NET Aspire is really growing and becoming the way to build applications. And I'm not saying .NET applications. I'm not saying web applications. I'm not saying mobile applications. Applications, because it's going to make everything you build better. I really think it's the top thing. We're in version 2. It's the second version of .NET Aspire here with .NET 9. It's labeled version 9 so that the version numbers snap in line with the rest of .NET. But it's the second version, and I know there's folks out there. I know your audience, Jeff. You got a lot of enterprise folks out there, and you believe in the rule of Microsoft version 3.
Version 3,
right?
Yeah.
Version 3 is where they get it right. Like version 1, hey, look at all this vision, look at what we want to do, and they don't quite get it all in there. In version 2, they get more of that stuff in there. And version 3 is where it's polished and it's really good. Version 3 is coming for .NET Aspire, and it's going to be on a long-term servicing release with the next version of .NET. But there's great stuff in there that you can use now.
Can I give a quick commentary on that?
Please.
Just my observations, because I started using .NET Aspire when it first came out almost a year ago. And you're right. In the past, the version 3, it's been okay. The first version, a lot of times you just wait and see because there was nothing stable until version 2 or 3. But this is a little bit different. It's not inventing a whole bunch of new tech, so it's not a stable thing. From my observation, version 1, it really helped out with developer workstation multi-project startup, which has always been a little bit tricky. Like if I have a batch job or a queue handler and a website, and in order to run it locally, I got to start up multiple things. It nailed that use case. And then version 2, it's kind of added more providers besides just Redis. It's added more of these integrations. And version 3, I think the big thing for version 3 is actually covering the unattended deployment process, where now that we're deploying to Azure container apps and Azure SQL and Azure Redis and all that stuff, all of the command line integration just runs without having to do it in an interactive console. And that opens up like the whole rest of the process.
So there's been early versions of that deployment capability available for 6 to 9 months. Not for the faint of heart.
Right.
I manage a website called aspirify.net that is all kinds of .NET Aspire news and source code samples and videos and podcasts. You might have found this podcast on it. And it was built with .NET, with Blazor, with .NET Aspire, and deployed using GitHub Actions and .NET Aspire tools. Now, I can't make the source code to that website open source because I bought a template for it. So I can't share the code for the template.
Yeah.
But all of the technology under it, there's nothing unique in there. And I've been sharing snippets and samples of the source code. But you're right that multi-application startup. So in Aspirify.net, there's the website, there's a little service that runs on the side that resizes thumbnails. That was always the canonical example for Azure Functions.
Yeah.
Well, I wrote a little service that sat on the side that does that thumbnail resize. But having to start that and this and the database and all the other things, there was folks that I forget who coined it, the term the F5 ability of your application.
Sure.
Right. Yeah. Cloning from source code repository, hand it off to that team member who's just joining the project team. Hey, go ahead and get started. Well, can they just press F5? Or was there a run script they had to run to configure their system? With Aspirify.net, with some of the other apps that you build with .NET Aspire, being able to hit F5 or just .NET run and it works is so refreshing. You're right, Jeff. It gets folks understanding how the application works. The other new project team members gets them understanding how the project works together faster. It's great stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And for the use cases that are there now, they are stable. Like it does work. What it does now actually works. It's great. I'm excited that the team is having more opinions, because it's one thing to have books and training on design patterns, like the different types of logging under telemetry and patterns for health checks. And I remember the time before the services collection where we talked about inversion of control containers and how should we dynamically decide what's going to implement the interface. But it's one thing to have a design pattern, but when there's a library that says, oh, this is a good general implementation of that design pattern, then the mental load for every developer to be productive on an application goes down.
You're right. The mental load goes down. It's showing that paved path, right? That was successful by somebody else, not just in an article on a blog somewhere, but actually in code and in a template, and giving folks that handheld path of success that they can follow. Yeah. Very powerful concept to be able to share with the community. So .NET Aspire is absolutely something folks need to get in and get familiar with. There's some other new things that came out that are interesting that folks should learn about. I'm still spending time myself learning about. Always new versions of programming language, always new versions of stuff coming out with ASP.NET Core, with Blazor, .NET MAUI. But we've now got a series of artificial intelligence building blocks that are available.
Okay.
So AI extensions for .NET that are going to allow folks to plug in language models, vector databases, other capabilities, and swap out those providers in the same way that you can swap out providers with Entity Framework. That same mentality, that same approach, you're going to start to see appearing and being able to be used with the various .NET, these .NET building blocks that we're making available. Really great way for you to provide that abstraction between your code and the provider you're working with, so that you want to bring something from this cloud and this AI model to that AI model and that cloud. You have the flexibility to do that. You want to change your vector database, you're going to have an easier way to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So once again, what strikes me about these things are these building blocks are something that's unique to the .NET ecosystem. You don't see this in other programming languages and ecosystems. There is no JavaScript AI building blocks. It's here's the SDK for working with Ollama. Here's the SDK for working with OpenAI and ChatGPT, and you have to rewrite your code for each one. Having the abstraction above them is just another example of how the .NET team is thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead and providing something that nobody else really has a name for. It's not a library, it's not a tool set, but it's a series of building blocks that enable other libraries and give you the freedom to interact with them in a consistent and unique manner. In a consistent manner across all of your applications. That's really powerful stuff. .NET Aspire isn't a library or a framework. It's a series of tools, libraries, packages that all come together and provide a better developer experience. But we don't have a name for it. It's not an orchestrator. It's not a deployment tool. It's something that when I think about DevOps, does a real good job on the dev. It's a big dev, and it sets up the ops so that the ops have the things that they've always wanted. So it's a DevOps series of tools and frameworks and libraries. So right, we get this weird place that folks that are outside of .NET, they're critical towards some of these building blocks and tools that we have because they don't have anything to compare it to that they can look at and say, oh, it's another one of these things. C#, oh, it's another programming language, right? ASP.NET, it's a web framework. Well, they don't have something like that in these other ecosystems. That's just how much ahead of the game the .NET team is in planning and developing and setting up the .NET developers and the .NET ops teams for success. That's a pretty good thing for all of us.
Yeah. You mentioned the AI extensions for .NET.
Yeah.
And I just want to make sure it's literally for people searching. It's literally the Microsoft.extensions.ai library, or is it more than that?
There's a series of implementations that go with it that help to plug in and provide the concrete implementations that go with the extensions AI. There are enhancements that were made to programming languages to better support coding and using things like tensors as a programming language construct inside C#. So they're just the first steps to enabling some of these other big math, big data interactions that you need to work with AI extensions, AI capabilities.
Gotcha.
So, but these are building blocks. There's implementations and there's these abstractions that help facilitate them.
On that front, just because you're doing a whole lot of programming, and the Copilot PCs have come out, the standard for you can have 40 40 tops of NPU capability, and Snapdragon, has good numbers there, and all the other processor they're working on, and NVIDIA doesn't. But so that's the laptop side of it. But a lot of us use desktop computers. So when you're evaluating what type of computer you, Jeff Fritz, want to use, for your main, what are you actually thinking about? Do you think, oh, I need to have something to run stuff more locally, or do you think, oh, we're going to run it all on the cloud anyway, so maybe not?
That's a great question. As a developer, I do want to be able to try to run things locally. That's right. First and foremost, I don't want to start burning through AI resources out on the cloud. But until I'm into my test and production spaces, I want to hold off and let me tinker and break things locally where there's no danger of running into any kind of an issue. I'll use the PHI model, PHI model to work with data locally here. I've used some other AI models. I've used the Whisper model to help with a transcription of voice data. There's a bunch of different AI data models that you can download and work with locally. So when I'm looking for my next computer, and I'm not looking for one now, if I was, I'd be looking for a machine that has, top of the line or second of the line, not processor, but NVIDIA card in it, so that I've got the GPU sitting there that I can throw the AI model on and let it process quickly. My current machine has an NVIDIA GeForce 3070. I'm looking through the glass panel over here so I can see it. Yeah. And it runs very well and is able to process and generate some very good output from either large language models or other analytics that I throw at it in a reasonable amount of time locally. So when I start thinking about, I'm going to be on a laptop, I'm going to be working somewhere away from big, heavy desktop here, I'm going to start looking at running a dev box in the cloud, so that I can hit a language model local to it. And I've also got that extensive capability of adding processor features, capabilities on the cloud. Then I can keep a smaller laptop that is dedicated and secured for just those things that I need that have to be local.
Yeah. All right. You heard it here, folks. NVIDIA graphics card. That's a important piece. And by the way, I stumbled upon that and my desktop PC a number of years ago. I've got dual high-end AMD graphics cards. It's like, oh, I went with AMD instead of NVIDIA.
Yeah.
At the wrong time.
Yeah, the NVIDIA cards have been very good. And this is my third NVIDIA card that I'm on. I've even got an NVIDIA card in my other laptop. And for video production works great, but then when I throw some of the AI stuff at it, it just eats it for lunch and really does a nice job.
Yeah. All right. So .NET 9, anything before we jump over to Ignite? Any big things that just are really moving the needle? You mentioned C#. I know there's a lot of little refinements, but every now and then there's like this one feature's like, whoa, that's going to change how everybody writes a little bit of code.
I don't feel that way about C# 13 right now. There's nothing in there that really gets me looking and saying, oh, I need to change the way I'm writing code right now. There's some new ref capabilities. There's some there's a field keyword that's now available. It's not changing the way that I'm writing code right now. It gives me options. I'm looking forward to features that are coming in C# 14 with .NET 10, and some of the things that the team is experimenting and tinkering with right now. The language team is a brilliant group of folks, and I'm looking forward to the outcome of some of their current experiments and where they lead.
Nice. All right, other highlights.
There's a new feature in ASP.NET. This is something I've been struggling with for the past few years because I build websites and publish them. I published the Aspirify.net website. And when you build websites with ASP.NET, ASP.NET and our demos always get you like 80% of the way there with being able to build and deploy something for the public internet. And some of the things that we've always had to do when we get ready to publish is that you need to compress your assets. Right? You want to take all of your static assets, you want to compress them as much as possible. You want to ship them with a Brotli or a gzip compression scheme from the web server. You want to put long expiration headers on them. You want to output cache and put caching headers on them as much as possible. Set up e-tags, last modified dates. You want to set up all of these things. And there were maybe a half dozen libraries that I would use and drop into my application to set up all of these things. And wouldn't you know, the .NET team just went and made a feature called static assets that does just about all of those features out of the box. So when you think about delivering images from your website, like the images aren't going to change.
Right.
So let's just send them out there, download them, and mark them with that long expiration header. Put the last modified tag on them, and let them get gzip compressed, Brotli compressed, so that they don't take a long time, and you never download them again. It does it out of the box. Same thing with your CSS and your JavaScript and your other resources, all with the new static assets feature. If you're publishing things for the public internet, start looking at using map static assets, because it's a throwback to how we used to piecemeal together, how you would put together the CSS minification and the JavaScript compression for uglification for your applications, going even back into .NET Framework. It does it out of the box in a nice way that you can refer to and use inside your application, and you can add as much or as little of it as you want to make your application. It'll just make your application faster in experience for your end users. It's great stuff that the team has invested time in, and I think you're going to find helps the feel of your application.
Well, that's a good point. That's yet another design pattern that you don't even have to go through the brain damage of figuring out all of the options for how to make that work and how the browsers like to see those things. It's just design pattern out of the box and use it. Yeah.
Because of how .NET uses the HTTP pipeline model, you can just add in the static assets capability, and it's a piece of middleware that gets added in to the appropriate place for you and enhances your application. Like, if somebody told me that you can spend an hour or two worth of work and to tune and tweak how you deliver part of your application, and it's going to make delivery of some of your resources 70 to 80% faster, sure, yeah, absolutely do that.
Yeah.
That's how much bandwidth that you're not paying for to be delivered on every visit to your application. That turns into real money when you're publishing to the internet.
Right.
That's real cost savings, so.
Absolutely.
Do it.
Well, it seems there's so much Copilot. The name Copilot is sprinkled in everywhere.
Yeah.
And from time to time, every year, Microsoft has these various themes, and it's very obvious that Copilot is a huge, theme this year. So when people are looking at all the announcements and they're hearing, Copilot this, Copilot that, GitHub Copilot, certainly there's things that are being worked on. It's like, okay, here's the vision. Someday we'll be able to do some other stuff. But literally right now, what are you using something Copilot for now of the various ones?
And so Copilot strikes, you hit on a very interesting point there. The word Copilot is literally on every Microsoft product right now.
Yeah.
It was on Ignite, like the Copilot event for AI professionals, or so they called it something like that. I'm like, wow, this is where we were. Do you remember back in 2010?
I remember Windows.NET Server.
Yes, everything was .NET in 2000. Windows.NET Server, Visual Studio.NET, .NET Framework, C#.NET, ASP.NET, WinForms.NET. Like, really? And in 2010, everything was Link, right?
That's right, yeah.
LINQ and LYNC and all these things. And now Copilot is the, 15 years later is the keyword du jour. And it's a perfect name for what AI should be doing for us.
A helper.
Don't make decisions on it. It's a helper. Yeah. the folks that are using lawyer AI to decide how to file lawsuits and how to respond to legal claims, are you nuts?
Yeah.
Are you like, it's a text calculator. Like the artificial intelligence, heavy on the air quotes there, that
Heavy on
folks are using.
artificial.
Yeah. It's a text calculator. It's just
Right.
calculating what's the relative priority of words to appear next to each other.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is. It's so. How do I use a Copilot? My a number one Copilot that I use is GitHub Copilot. I did a live stream earlier today where I was using GitHub Copilot to generate. I put a quick grid on a form. So here's a grid that's appearing on a website,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted to take the last column and turn it into a series of hyperlinks that when you clicked it, turned into a drop-down box
Mm-hmm.
with a save button next to it. And GitHub Copilot generated most of that code for me. Now, its first pass at attempting to write some of that code wasn't what I was looking for, so I had to give it a little more context, a little bit more direction, but it generated most of the code that I needed, and I didn't write it. I didn't have to spend the time writing it, but I did have to spend time with my human mind verifying that it was the right thing.
Yeah.
Now, that's a pretty good thing. I really enjoy that. I hit Microsoft Copilot to ask it a question earlier today about, I forget what it was, the question I asked it about, but it was another type of, hey, give me some text, summarize a little bit, and that's really cool to do. It's absolutely amazing that GitHub has a Copilot that runs on GitHub. So I guess it's the GitHub Copilot for GitHub that I can point to a pull request and say, summarize this and give me a good description for this pull request.
Yeah.
And it generates sometimes a little bit too much detail for the description, but it's enough detail that, once again, I can tweak that a little bit, and it's easy for me to edit that down to what I mean to convey to the rest of the project team. I like that. So GitHub Copilot absolutely is the number one Copilot that I'm using. Some of the other Copilots that are out there, I think, are a little daunting, can be a little overwhelming and get a little too invasive on my space as a human trying to generate content. There's great Copilots in Excel that help generate formulas for things, and in Word to help summarize and make and focus what it is that I'm writing. But when I use a Copilot in something like Loop, it's over the top in my face, trying to assist me with every keystroke. And, oh, did you mean to create a table? Oh, did you mean to do this? Hey, let me go and format this for you automatically. Stop. Let me type my paragraph here, friend.
Yeah.
And then we'll go and add some of these cool formatting things. So there's levels that we're seeing, and we're becoming accustomed to, and we're learning just how much we want that assistance and how much we want to dial back the assistance. And when I'm staring at the blank sheet of paper, when I'm trying to write notes, generate some thoughts, plan what I'm going to do for a workshop or some content I'm going to record, I want to dial down the AI when I start writing. And after I get in, at least a couple paragraphs, okay, let's start to dial it in, let it analyze, and give me additional ideas based on this huge repository of information that it's analyzed. Give me some ideas that are complementary to what I've already started, but let me take those first steps as a human to get my ideas on paper, and then we'll go from there to enhancing and doing more with it.
I like your emphasis on calling it a language calculator, because I think for everyone, understanding the architecture of something and what it's actually doing helps us all make decisions on what use cases to pull that tool out of my tool belt versus something else. Just like back when document databases were brand new, some people were going around, oh, document database for everything. Document database equals good, and therefore use it for everything. I find, based on the architecture being a language calculator, that there's so many models out there in the marketing commercials where you're asking this free-form question as if it's going to give you back an answer, versus which is all based on who trained the model, what data they selected, how they chose to label the data, how they trained the model versus the GitHub Copilot. Whereas I've had really interesting cases where I have a design pattern implemented in the present code base. And when I ask it to generate something, it's grounded on the current code base, and it uses my design pattern and my naming conventions, and whether I'm using in-unit versus X-unit or just all the different mix of libraries. And because it's I guess trained, grounded on the data that I've put in front of it, it's very useful.
Oh yeah. Especially when we think about programming, every keystroke matters. It's time that you're spending in building something, in analyzing, in correcting, doing that quality assurance, and every keystroke is time and productivity. And if we can shorten that, well, that means that you have quicker time to market, you have higher quality, all good things that we can turn from it. So it in my mind, GitHub Copilot is, as a developer, the best of the copilots that I use.
Nice. Well, as we close up here on our show, we'll include all the links that we talked about in the show notes. What is your favorite way to catch up with content that people missed on .NETConf and Ignite?
So all of the videos from .NETConf are, of course, available on the .NET YouTube. They're all available, and they're all listed and described on the .NETConf website. So you can go search through there and find some of your favorite topics, and I believe they're linked through to the YouTube video from the .NETConf website. So I think that's a fantastic way to start at the .NETConf website. Search for the topics that you're interested in and figure out and plug in there. There's some other interesting topics around gaming. There's some topics around interacting with C++ code that are interesting and fun that you can get into. And maybe it opens your eyes to another type of project, another technology that you can enjoy and have a good time with. But Ignite's a tougher nut to crack. There's a list of sessions that are available on ignite.microsoft.com. You can search through there and find content, but the search, you're limited to only a few sessions, a few items of content on the screen at a time. Not all of the sessions they're presenting are recorded and available for you. But there's absolutely great stuff there for you to find and search through. The videos from that are available on, I think it's the Microsoft Ignite channel on YouTube. We can double check that and make sure you have a good link that for you to share in the show notes.
Yeah.
But I don't know if anybody's written up a good summary that isn't a summary of the keynotes from Ignite, but a summary of here's some of the great content that I saw. I haven't spent time looking for that. The session I gave at Ignite was about upgrading applications to .NET 9 and how the upgrade assistant works. I'd be thrilled if your viewers, your audience tuned in, checked out that session, gave it a thumbs up, and put a little bit of weight on the scale for me for delivering my session. But there's even hidden announcements that weren't really part of the keynotes, and if you blinked during the keynote, you missed it, and the folks who are summarizing the keynotes didn't mention. So, like, the announcement that we had in our session was about an AI-enabled, a Copilot-enabled upgrade assistant that's coming in the future.
Nice.
So the idea being we've got the expert system with the current upgrade assistant that knows how to take things in a known set of frameworks and tools and implementations, and it knows how to migrate that from an older version of .NET to the current version of .NET. And we know that there are some things that humans have to get in there and tweak and tune. But because we have GitHub Copilot, we know the patterns and practices that you want in the new version of whatever it is you're upgrading to in the next .NET version.
Right.
So what we announced and what we showed were the plans that we have to start allowing GitHub Copilot to, after the expert system is applied, come through and look at that migration and do its inference based on its training models of how to migrate things from old version to new version.
Oh,
and then,
nice.
of course, the third party in that triangle, the developer, comes in and can tweak and tune and make sure that the new version works the way you want it to.
Right.
So we were really excited about that announcement. Lots of interest from folks about how we can use AI to help with upgrades. Jeff, it feels like upgrades are the thing that are always, you're never going to get away from it. You always need to upgrade your code.
That's right.
If it's from version 8 to version 9, if it's from version 6 to version 9 or 6 to version 10, you're going to need to upgrade your code at some point. If you've got code that's 20 years old sitting out there and still doing a productive job for you, good for you.
Yeah.
But don't let the security analysts look at your code because they're going to get you.
Right.
You need to upgrade your code at some point.
That's right.
And
that's right.
Having the expert system with the mix of AI and then the humans being able to review it, we think is going to make that process so much easier and more productive for folks when we release this next upgrade assistant.
That's awesome. Well, Jeff, thanks for coming back on the Azure and DevOps podcast to share with us .NET 9 and all things surrounding the exciting release. We really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Oh, it's great to be here, Jeff, and we'll have to do this again sometime. What are you saying about a year?
That sounds great. And until next time, keep shipping.
You've been listening to the Azure DevOps Podcast, a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Go to www.azuredevops.show for show notes and other episodes. On behalf of your host, Jeffrey Palermo, and our sponsors, thanks for listening, and may God bless you.